3, 2, 1, execute.
Oliver Wallstrom, who's out hurt. Both trying to change it back and he scores! 10 for 23 lifetime in on Sorrows. What a move! Deposits it.
Kachuk with speed, goes back against the grain and scores on the backhand.
A chance to put the Canes in the lead here in the shootout stretch. He scores! To the blocker's side. Svechnikov with
Turn it up to your speakers.
We've reached almost the end of hockey season. Welcome back to the Silky Mitts podcast here on Penn State Sports Night. The same cast, same guys as usual. We're previewing the 2022 Stanley Cup Final. Josh Bartosik, Tim Rogers. What a playoffs, first of all, this has been. I mean, it's been back and forth, controversial calls, big hits, you name it. But I think let's just get right into it. So let's break down. So the 2022 Stanley Cup Final is featuring the Colorado Avalanche and the two-time defending champion, Tampa Bay Lighting. Tim is rolling his eyes. He's like, oh, my Islanders were so close last year.
Oh, you really had to bring it up, didn't you?
I did.
So rude.
So rude,
man. Hey, when's the last time your Capitals got close, bud?
I don't care.
Okay.
The Caps are done.
Dude,
they're done.
I don't know. That voice crack made it sound like he cared.
That's
That's
they're
me.
done. They are done. Anyways, so Tampa Bay Lightning, Colorado Avalanche. First off, this Stanley Cup, before we actually preview the matchup, this Stanley Cup's final probably going to be the one of the most exciting ones of this era. We were talking about it before we started this podcast. You know, when was the last time we've had an exciting Stanley Cup final? Because last year it wasn't even close. Tampa was better than Montreal. Year prior, it was the bubble. I mean, had some exciting moments like Corey Perry's OT goal descent to 6. But, you know, when was the last time really we had a exciting Stanley Cup final? And just what are you guys looking forward to for this matchup? Josh,
yeah, I mean, it's going to be a very exciting one. I mean, it's going to be fantastic. I'm just looking forward to actually seeing some like the greatest hockey players that our generation has to offer actually like playing against each other. I mean, we had a fantastic Western Conference final matchup between McKinnon and McDavid. Now you get McKinnon versus Stamkos, Makar versus Hedman, Kemper versus Vasilevsky, which is a little one-sided if you really think about it. But this is we were talking about it before, like you mentioned, this is by far probably one of the most exciting Stanley Cup finals we had in a while. I mean, we can go more in depth later, but I think it's going to come down to the tiny things and really just who is more, ready for game time, because they both are not going to have played for quite a while. Colorado hasn't played since the 6th, and Tampa hasn't played since the 11th. So they'll both have a decent amount of time of rest. So it'll just be who's fresher come game time.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's one of those things where if this is like the first time I think in years where like the two actual favorites of each side actually are representing, the East and the West. I mean, at the beginning of the season, everybody predicted Colorado, and a lot of people, knew Tampa that was going to be here yet again. So it's one of those things where I think it's going to be very exciting because there's so many matchups that just line up perfectly. Like Makar and Taves going against the Tampa top line of Kucherov and Stamkos, and Palat, who's having a great playoffs as well. You got McKinnon and Landeskog and Rantanen, and all these guys are going for their first cup versus, the experience. And it's going to be very interesting to see how it plays out. It's not surprising, is my point. It's just, and especially if you watch, we're going to talk about it here, the conference matchups, you can tell that this was going to be the matchup, and both teams have one mission, and that's to raise the Stanley Cup. For Tampa, it's going to be third time in a row if they do, but for Colorado, this will be finally fighting off their demons, if you will, of just years and years of just not being able to get here, even though they should be. So I'm very excited to see how it plays out. I don't know. I still don't know. And I mean, at the end, we're going to give our predictions, but I still don't know yet. So.
Yeah, definitely. All right, let's just get right into it. Let's recap the Eastern Conference Final. Tampa beats New York in 6. And I said it was going to be close. It was indeed close. You guys said otherwise. Sorry, I had to bring that up. It's on tape. I have the receipts. Tim, say the words. Say the words.
Okay. You were right, Jacob. You were right.
Yes.
But I will
Doesn't
say
happen
this.
a lot.
I will say this. It looked a lot closer than it was. I think game 3, true. I mean, we talked about this before we went on air. Game 3, that was the deciding point to me, because I think if the Rangers win that one, I don't see the Rangers losing the series, but I think blowing that 2-goal lead, and you could just tell how tired the Rangers got, man. I mean, back-to-back 7-game series, that's going to wear you down, and it was one of those things where it looked like Tampa, the rest kind of didn't help Tampa to start out. They didn't look prepared. They looked rusty. They looked, not 100% fully in. And, watching Stamkos after winning in his interview, he basically said the same thing. It was just like, we weren't fully prepared, but you got to give the Rangers credit. They came out flying. And that's the first series that they've ever led in this playoffs, being down to Carolina and Pittsburgh. But it's one of those things where, if you're a Rangers fan, and this is going to really sting for me to say, you really shouldn't be that too upset, because you overachieved. You weren't supposed to be here this year. You were supposed to be here a couple of years down the line. But I mean, what is it? 2 years ago, the Rangers were still in a rebuild. Now they just went to the Eastern Conference Final, and they'll be back. They have, I don't know if Chris Kreider is going to be able to put up 50 goals again. I don't know if Zibanejad is going to be the caliber that he was. I don't know if Shesterkin is going to be able to play 65 games again. But it's one of those things where having that young core and that young identity, they will be just fine. The Rangers will be a playoff team for years to come, which really angers me as an Islanders fan. But I will say, what New York team took them to 7? But anyways, it's one of those things where, again, this is going to anger me to say too, you just have to look at Tampa and you just have to call them a dynasty. You genuinely have to call them a dynasty at this point. This is 3 straight Stanley Cup appearances. That to me is a dynasty. Even if they win or lose this, they're doing this without Braden Point, who the last 2 playoffs have been their heart and soul and their key contributor in key playoff games. I mean, he was in round 1 when he got the game winner in overtime against Toronto. So they're doing that without key pieces. I know every team is banged up. And when we get to the Western Conference, we'll obviously talk about that for Edmonton and what Draisaitl had to go through for playing in the series. But the way that Tampa is able to just breeze past with injuries and with flaws, and when Tampa plays their game, nobody can beat them. And the big duel and the big key of this matchup, Jacob, you said, was going to be between Shesterkin and Vasilevsky. And it didn't disappoint at all, because both goaltenders were top tier. But Vasilevsky won the battle. It was just he shut down the Rangers. And it's also, you got to give credit to the Tampa defense. They really pushed the shots on the outside for the Rangers. Watching Game 6 was a masterclass by them. It was a perfect defensive game. They were peppering Shesterkin, who was truly standing on his head. And that was me and Josh's point about how the Rangers' defensive structure wasn't great. You saw it here. They didn't have one. It was Shesterkin standing on his head. So it's one of those things where you just have to look at Tampa and make you wonder who's going to stop them, because they're a dynasty now. That's what they are.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of have to call it that at this point. I mean, we had called the Chicago Blackhawks, barring all their off-ice issues, they had the 3 Stanley Cups in 5 years. We called them a dynasty, and now Tampa has a chance to go 3-3 first in almost 40 years since the Oilers did it in the 80s. So it's a good chance for them. But I mean, the Rangers did a really good job of playing defense and just limiting Carolina throughout the majority of that series. We talked about that, and their defense was phenomenal. It wasn't there in this series. They got outcoached by John Cooper. He's a heck of a coach. We know that. Gerard Gallant is a great coach himself, but sometimes you get outcoached. Carolina got outcoached in their series against the Rangers, and I think the Rangers got outcoached here. I think you have to look at the veteran leadership and the experience that Tampa has. I mean, they've won 11 straight series now, which is third most in NHL history. It's insane. Ever since they got swept by Columbus, they haven't lost. They've looked dominant in almost every series. The only one that's really been close was their first round matchup against Toronto, where, it went 7 games and Toronto almost had it. But I mean, they're just an absolute wagon. You do have to give props to the Rangers. No one expected them to be here. But my thing with this, yes, you have a lot to look forward to if you're a Rangers fan. Yes. But we know how hard it is to get back to that spot. And you had a chance to have a 3-0 lead in the Eastern Conference Final as a very young team against a 2 times defending Stanley Cup champion. You may never get that again. We said the same thing about Carolina in 2019 when they made the Eastern Conference Final. They were a young team. No one expected them to get there. They've continuously developed their youth, and they've gotten better every year, and they haven't reached the Eastern Conference Final again. Now, I still think the Rangers have a better overall lineup and system than Carolina based on, you've got guys like Adam Fox, Keandre Miller, Ryan Lindgren, and you still have, your star power in Zibanejad and Panarin, and Carolina doesn't really have that. We talked about this on the last Silky Mitts podcast, but we know how tough it is, man. I mean, Florida's probably going to be back. They'll be, Columbus is on the up and coming. The Islanders, depending on how the whole Lane Lambert thing goes, they could be back up there. Carolina will always be making the playoffs for these next couple of years, it seems. So, I mean, we know the East is tough. I mean, yes, a lot of people thought Tampa would make it back here, but the East was kind of wide open. In the West, Colorado was the clear favorites. You had maybe 3 or 4 favorites coming out of the East. You had a lot of people thought Boston would make a deep run. I know, Tim, you thought Boston would make the finals before we started this. Carolina was in there for some people. Tampa, and obviously the President's Trophy winners and the Florida Panthers were up there for a lot of people. So it just goes to show that the East is so competitive. And for the Rangers, yes, you have a lot to look forward to. You've got a great young group, but you also can't take your foot off the gas, because we know that it's extremely difficult to get back here, which also just goes to the point that Tampa is just an absolute dynasty at this point. I mean, 3 straight Stanley Cup final appearances is just absolutely dominant. I mean, there's not a whole lot more you can say about it. They played a phenomenal Game 6. I mean, yeah, Tim, you called it. I mean, Game 3, if they don't blow that 2-goal lead, I think they might sweep. Honestly, maybe win in 5 if you're the Rangers, but that was the turning point for me in that series. The second that happened, it looked like Tampa finally came to life and they couldn't really stop them. So props to the Rangers for getting this far. No one thought they would. That decision by Gerard Gallant to scratch, one of your top young guys in a Game 6, an elimination game in the Eastern Conference Final, to bring it to just have more injured Ryan Strome, who was playing on one leg, it turns out. I mean, I don't know his decision then, but yeah, I mean, I don't understand the decision. I mean, specifically ESPN was talking all the time about the kid line with Kakko, Lafreniere, and Hedl. Why break that up? It was your best line in all the playoffs. Yes, they were kind of shut down against Tampa, but I mean, they got you past Carolina and Pittsburgh. I don't know why you get rid of that, but I mean, the Rangers will be back. The East is going to be a bloodbath for years to come. And I mean, I think you can't call it Tampa anything less than a dynasty. This is probably one of the best constructed teams we've seen in years. And I'm going to give all the credit to Pat Maroon, because it's going to be his 4th straight Stanley Cup final.
Yeah. I was listening on the radio and NHL Network, and one of the guys said Tampa's already the best team in this salary cap era. And, I agree with that just because of what they were able to do. One thing that stood out in that series with Tampa, I only watched the first 3 games because, I've been busy with work, is their ability to adjust defensively. When, the Rangers were firing on all these kind of shots and playing well, Tampa was able to lock it down defensively. And both Colorado and Tampa can defend well. So it's going to be all about the adjustment. So Tampa was able to do that. They were adjust defensively, play in their own zone well. And also, yeah, you could point the finger at Ryan Strome for missing the 2 empty nets, taking bad penalties. But where was the Rangers' top line? That was my biggest issue on why the Rangers lost. Where was Artemi Panarin? Where was Mika Zibanejad? Where was Adam Fox? Chris Kreider? Those guys were not, outside of the first 2 games in that series, they were shut down. And we always say you can't win without your star players. And that's, I think, exactly what happened. And I think that's the reason why the Rangers lost this series, is because their top line, the star players, were not very good, in this series. And Artemi Panarin, honestly, I mean, I haven't really looked at the stats. He was more so carried by the guys like Zibanejad, Kreider, Fox, and obviously that kid line. He wasn't really a big impact player in these playoffs.
You could say the same thing in the Carolina series up until you get to Adam Fox and Chris Kreider. But yeah, Artemi Panarin has been almost invisible in these playoffs. I think he was almost invisible because his playoffs are over. That might be a bit of a concern for the Rangers. I mean, you're paying the guy like $10-11 million a year. He's one of the top paid players in the league, but he gets you almost 40 goals a season. So I mean, it could just be a 1-year thing with him. It's not. I don't think it will become a consistent problem unless you start getting into Carolina era where you have guys like Aho and Svechnikov that score 1 goal in the playoffs and nothing else. But I think that is
a game-winning goal in Pittsburgh. I forgot about that.
That's true. That, I mean, yeah. So
I forgot about that.
Yeah, but he was completely shut down against Carolina. Chris Kreider popped off in Game 7. Adam Fox was dominant the entire series, but Panarin was very minimal in that Carolina series and in this series against Tampa too. So, I mean, again, it's your top player. He's going to get shut down, and that's why you have your depth scoring and your other lines that can do it for him. That's why they got so far. Other teams like Carolina, Pittsburgh just weren't getting that, although Pittsburgh really just wasn't getting goaltending or any health, really. So, I mean, yeah, your star players not contributing does play a factor, but overall, I think the veteran, the fact that Tampa's been here so many times before, and the Rangers are such a young team, and they've got so many guys that are, in their early to mid 20s. I can't really blame them. It's their first time playing that. You saw the emotions in Game 1 and 2, and they just could not come back. Game 5 was a killer for them, giving up that last minute goal. Just really broke them. You could tell, because that was a key game too. Back home at the Garden, you're about a minute and a half away from overtime, and you give up a backbreaking goal that also kind of, it showed the series was pretty much going to be over. So,
also they struggled at even strength. That was another thing. That
was my thing going into the playoffs. Remember, was that I didn't think they were a terrible 5v5 team. They didn't show it against Carolina. They showed it against Pittsburgh and Tampa though. And that's the thing. You struggle at even strength. They're a very good power play team. They're not the best penalty killing team when it comes to playing teams like Tampa because of their power play being so dominant, but you got to be better at 5v5. They've been a terrible 5v5 team all season long. It would have bit them against Pittsburgh if Pittsburgh didn't have, Louis Domingue in net, and it didn't bite them against Carolina because Carolina just sucked. I can say that now. But it bit them against Tampa. You got to play better against the 2-time defending Stanley Cup champions. They got absolutely outclassed at even strength.
Look, it's hard. I agree. I think their 5-on-5 even strength play was not up to their standards. And Panarin only had 5 points in this series, and the majority of it came in the first 2 games. It's more, to me, the way I look at it is you just got to give credit to the other team at that point. It's not, why did this guy not perform and this guy not perform? It was Tampa did their job. And the reason that I can say that is because last year I was in the same shoes. I was saying, why is Leo Komarov a first line player for the New York Islanders, which I can still say to this day that he's not. But, you judge them right in the moment because that's an impulse reaction, right? You just have to take a step back, and Tampa, Josh, you said it best. They outcoached them. The tactics that came into this was perfect. They knew, they weathered the storm in the first 2 games, and they learned from those 2 games and just dominated through the rest. They were the better team. They were truly the better team from Game 3 to Game 6. It's as simple as that. I'm not too worried about the Panarin thing. I think, look, when Columbus had their amazing little run when they swept Tampa, Panarin was the heart and soul of that. He was the guy that was getting the goals, getting the points for them. And although, yes, he wasn't really that visible against Carolina, he was against Pittsburgh, especially when it mattered in Game 7. He was the best player on the ice in Game 7, exactly why he got the game-winning goal. But he was the guy that generated the momentum for them. I do want to say real quickly, I'm very happy to hear that the Tampa Bay Lightning fan that got hit at MSG is okay. He's completely fine. That's great. You know, I don't think all Rangers fans are like that. I mean, obviously, I think we've all seen the video, but good to see that he's okay. And I bet you he's pretty happy right now. But overall, look, Tampa's, I think, in a very great position to go back to back to back, and there's no denying it. And that's the hard part, because, you know, any normal fan that's not a Tampa Bay Lightning fan doesn't like the Tampa Bay Lightning, because you don't like to see a favorite keep going and going and going again. It's just, you like the underdog teams, but they're just a wagon. They are a full force team that is, every little thing about them is perfect. And they lost key pieces this past year, you know, like Barclay Grujo, who was on the other side, you know, Blake Coleman. These were guys that were contributing huge for them in the playoffs last year. And they replaced them with Nick Paul and Brandon Hagel, who a poor guy, cannot find the back of the net. I mean, I don't know how many opportunities he is finding, but the offense that he is generating is incredible. And Nick Paul is the single reason why they got past Toronto in Game 7. So Tampa just always finds a way, man. Like, they just always find a way. And it's going to be really interesting to see how they match up against the team coming out of the West here.
I will say my last note is just to make my poor Carolina Hurricanes heart a little happy, is now the Rangers know what it's like to go up 2-0 in a series at home and then blow it. So we're now in the same boat. That's fantastic. Anyways, let's talk about Mike Smith.
Oh, yes. All right. So with that, all right, why don't we move on to the Western Conference Final? Another time where I was right. Say it again. Okay, hold on.
We were all right, though. I said Mike Smith was terrible.
Well, yes, but if you watch the games, some of the games were actually very close, even though the series wasn't, in terms of, you know, the numbers.
Okay, they were close, but then what happened? Mike Smith things?
Yes, correct.
I'll get into that later.
Mike Smith was not very good, and what's crazy is that the Edmonton Oilers, if they had a legit number one in this series, they at least would have took it to 7. And the Oilers as a whole are probably one solid goaltender away from winning the Stanley Cup. That's just how good, especially, you know, we always talk about the Oilers and their lack of depth. This year, they had some of that depth pieces step up. Yeah, Evander Kane played terrific. Zach Hyman played terrific.
But I don't really fully consider them depth pieces. They're your first line guys.
True.
If
they
you
had more help.
Yes, yes, that is right. But the truth of the matter is, Connor McDavid, if anybody questions how good this kid truly is anymore, I'm sorry, you don't know hockey. This kid is the best player in the NHL. He has 33 points in the playoffs, and the only person that's close to him and that is still playing is Kucherov, who has 23. He has 10 more points. Are you kidding? That's amazing. And Draisaitl was playing on one leg with 3 ribs. Like, he was absolutely destroyed, and he has 1 less point than him. I mean, these two guys are absolute superstars. And, you know, the one thing that I saw that kind of worries me about Colorado is they had a couple turnovers and in their own zone. And when you're going against a team that has Connor McDavid, they're going to make you pay. And he did a lot. Obviously, Mike Smith, Josh's favorite player besides Tony DeAngelo, showed up, which really helped him out. But
yes,
when you look at it, I don't think Colorado is going to be able to make those mistakes against Tampa. But I think I'm going to stay on Edmonton real quick, but this team's really good, man. And you got to give them credit. You got to give McDavid credit. You got to give Draisaitl loads of credit. You can tell he was visibly hurt. And it was actually kind of hard to watch at times, to watch him out there, because he was just putting his body on the line. Like, he was truly doing everything he could to just win one game. And I think if you're Edmonton, you go out and this is when you have to get yourself a number one goaltender. You know, there's a lot of teams out there that I think could easily be giving up somebody like that. You know, one that comes to mind, obviously, is I'm a fan of him. I think if they try to go for Semyon Varlamov, that would be a home run for them. I think he would fit in perfectly in their system, but they need a number one goaltender. And if they do that, I think you're starting to look at an Edmonton team that's a consistent playoff team.
I think
Yeah,
they'll be in the playoffs again just because. Sorry, Josh. I think they'll be in the playoffs again just because of the division they're in. I think that's the only reason why they got in. And I honestly didn't expect them to go this far. But yeah, Josh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're
Mike Smith.
exactly right. You're exactly right. I mean, look, there's rumors that John Gibson wants
Yeah.
out of Anaheim. Someone kind of shut down those rumors earlier today, but John Gibson, granted, he's going to cost a lot, but John Gibson would be perfect for them. I think he is by far one of the best goaltenders in the league. He's had a rough couple of years, but also playing behind the Anaheim Ducks defensive system, which is not great, especially now that they don't have Josh Manson anymore. But this series, it came down to goaltending. Darcy Kemper wasn't great, but he was enough.
Francouz.
He was enough.
Francouz.
And Francouz played very well too when he was needed. And I mean, you have a guy like Pavel Francouz who was playing phenomenal hockey against guys like Connor McDavid, and granted, Leon Draisaitl, like you mentioned, was injured, but he shut down Connor McDavid in game 2. They shut him down. Francouz was amazing. Francouz, again, this is what I said it on one of our last Penn State Sports Night segments. If Colorado stays healthy, they're the Cup favorites by a mile. And they've been relatively healthy in these playoffs, minus the Nazem Kadri injury that he sustained in this series. And he's going to be back for around game 2 or 3, which will be huge for them. But Kadri didn't get suspended. You didn't have, the bubble year where their entire team was injured and they had to start, who was it? Michael Hutchinson in net in game 7.
Yeah.
They've been playing phenomenal, absolutely destroyed Edmonton and Nashville. Granted, Nashville was kind of, on their last legs there. They beat a really, really solid team in the St. Louis Blues. And Cheris, they were one of your sneaky picks coming into these playoffs. They played a phenomenal series against St. Louis, really played well. And it goes to show that their entire team is so stacked when a guy like Darren Helm, who's been in the league for God knows how long, scores the game, like the series winning goal with 6 seconds left. So, I mean, Colorado is similar to Tampa. They're an absolute wagon when they're healthy. Tampa's a wagon even when they're not healthy. I mean, they've been missing Braden Point since, Toronto, and they've been phenomenal. But I want to talk about my favorite goaltender in the world, in Mike Smith.
Let's hear it.
A 2-goal lead.
He was not good.
No, well, that's putting it lightly. They had a 2-goal lead in game 4. Granted, you're already down 3-0 in the series. But I mean, hey, one game, you win a game at home, who knows? You've got the best player, 2 of the best players in the world in Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. Anything can happen. Why are you going out to play the puck 30 feet away from your net when you're up by 2 with about 17 minutes left in the game? What are you doing? Not only that, you see the ref directly in front of you, and you still try to clear the puck off of him, and obviously it doesn't go your way. And then you get scored on, and you are screaming at the ref, even though you knew he was there. And then he threw a little tantrum on the ice. He's like banging his stick, throwing it. He's a child. He plays like a child. He can't see the puck for anything. He's absolutely terrible. And Edmonton fans had this issue in the last offseason. They choked again last year early in their playoff run, and it was all due to Mike Smith. And every fan was furious when they re-signed him. Furious. There were a lot of options. Granted, with your limited cap space, it's kind of tough, especially when you take on the contract of Duncan Keith, who I will admit,
he played well.
Fantastic playoffs, which shocked me. He was phenomenal in these playoffs. I will give credit where credit is due. But 41-year-old Mike Smith, who again plays like it's 1957, is not going to lead any team to a Stanley Cup final. I'm shocked they made it this. I mean, Mike Smith outperformed Jacob Markstrom, which is bad in on itself for Markstrom, but he was absolutely abysmal. We knew this was going to happen. We knew that Colorado was facing, besides Connor Ingram, the worst goaltender that they will ever see in these playoffs. It's probably the easiest series for them, I would say.
Oh yeah.
You're playing a goaltender that doesn't know what he's doing, has thrown a tantrum in every game. It's somehow never his fault when there's a bad goal that's given up. I don't know. I mean, we talked about this in the Calgary series where he gave up like that 200-foot goal and looked for someone to blame. He did the same thing where he caused the one of the game deciding turnovers against Colorado, which shifted the tide in game 4. It's never his fault. You have to let him go. You have to try and find someone out there who can just be reliable. Jack Campbell would be a good cheap option for them. He kind of proved himself against Tampa in that Toronto series. I don't know if Toronto wants to let him go because they finally have a decent guy besides Freddie Anderson.
I don't think Toronto can re-sign him. I think that's the problem. I don't think
That is a
Toronto
big
has the
problem.
cap space,
Or-
unless they get rid of a not so good captain. But
That's a good point. But here's another one. Carolina, you got Pyotr Kochetkov, who was dominant in the games he played in the regular season and was pretty solid in the playoffs, minus game 7 against the Rangers. Antirano was really solid. Antirano is a good trade option. You want to get rid of Jesse Puljujarvi, you could get something like that going for them. Toronto would be a good piece for them. They need a goaltender. If they get, I mean, Cheris, you put it best. They get a goaltender, they're a Stanley Cup favorite. That's what they need. It's absolutely ridiculous that front office, specifically Ken Holland, who kind of ran Detroit into the ground because he was so insistent on them just making the playoffs, not being a good team after their dynasty run for 20 something years. He just ran that team into the ground. He's gonna do the same thing to Edmonton. He's too stubborn. You gotta shake something up. It's gonna be tough because of their cap situation, but if they can get a goaltender, they're easily gonna be back in the situation easily.
Jacob, I want to say something real quick before you go. I think we all actually should owe Edmonton an apology. We all thought that they were never going to be here. All of us thought they weren't good. I mean,
All of us thought they would lose to the Kings. Yeah.
and by the way, they almost did. But it's one of those things where if you look at this Edmonton team, I think they needed to get that first series win off their back to get that pressure off their back. And now all of a sudden we're talking about them. If they get a goalie, they're a Stanley Cup favorite. I mean, that's incredible for them. And so they deserve a load of credit for how far they have gotten. And it's one of those things where I'm a little worried to put all my go all in on Edmonton after they beat San Jose in what was it, 2017, 18 season.
No.
And then all of a sudden they
16, 17.
right. And then all of a sudden they were considered a consistent playoff team after that. And they didn't make the playoffs until the bubble. So it's one of those things where I'm a little hesitant, but I really like this Edmonton team a lot more than that other one. I mean, they had help this year. You know, Zach Hyman, I think, is their best signing that they've had in a long time when it comes to free agency. He fits perfectly, you know, penalty kill, power play, whatever. He does all the little things. Look, we talked about this in the last episode. What he does off the ice, nobody likes, but Evander Kane was an absolute steal for them. You know, not even making $1 million. He was an absolute steal. He could easily be getting probably $4 or $5 million in the free agency market this offseason.
Demanding 7 to 8.
Okay, that's a little ridiculous, but
That's absolutely
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
that's terrible. That's terrible. But I think overall, I'm just going to give Edmonton some credit that they are, you know, we were looking at them as, you know, Calgary Flames types of just consistent chokers, which I was right about Calgary, and Josh was too. But
Yay.
Edmonton's there, man. Like they look really good. They look very good.
One thing I want to say about Mike Smith is what's crazy is that he's such a streaky goaltender because he made a lot of really, really good saves, like really flashy saves, but he just couldn't keep that going.
Okay,
Really.
but here's my thing is that the saves that he makes that are considered flashy, half of them are self-induced errors where he has to go and make a flashy save because he misplays the puck a lot, or he makes it look flashy because every time he makes a glove save, he does this afterwards and starts flopping around like a fish out of water.
That's
why I can't stand him.
Which for Shesterkin, that one really didn't work out too well for him, did it? In Game 6 when he
We
tried
didn't even
to
mention that.
Wow.
he tried to do the full thing, and then all of a sudden the puck goes out of his glove, and he thought it was a kicking motion.
Right. But I mean, that's why I haven't liked Mike Smith for years because he's a floppy goaltender. He's a fish out of water. That's what he is. And I can't stand it. And it's self-inflicted wounds for him. Yes, he made some great saves, but if you look back, there were a lot of times in the regular season too, where he would misplay the puck or just misread a play wrong. And he had to go back and try and and he'd save himself with like a top 10 save, but it's also a top 10 error on his part at the same time.
So Josh, who do you hate more, Tony DeAngelo or Mike Smith?
Well, if we're talking about on ice performance like Smith, if we're talking off ice, it's got to be Tony DeAngelo. But
I think they would be perfect together. Maybe you guys should trade for Mike Smith.
Yes.
Why not?
Yeah, I mean, who needs potential Vezina finalist Frederick Anderson when you've got 42-year-old Mike Smith?
Yeah. He's a free agent this year, right?
Who, Anderson or Smith?
Smith.
I don't think Smith is. I still think he's under contract.
It's not.
Well, now the Oilers need a
that's
backup
right. It
goalie.
was a 2-by-2.
Nico Koskinen is going, I think, to the KHL. So now they need a backup goalie.
They need an actual goalie. Smith's
True.
an AHL. Smith's an AHL backup. Don't even be stupid.
And what's
At
crazy,
best.
Mike Smith won 8 straight games down the stretch, the last 8 games of the season for the Edmonton Oilers. So everyone thought, oh, he might break out of his funk. And I don't know, man. He was a streaky goaltender, but yeah, he did not play well. Granted, Edmonton had a tough time neutralizing Colorado's speed, which is a very difficult thing to do. One team that can do it is going to be the Tampa Bay Lightning, right? So, and for any team that's hard to do. So, yeah, you're right. We got to give credit where credit is due to the Edmonton Oilers. I think if they're in the Stanley Cup final, I think Connor McDavid wins the Conn Smythe Trophy, even if the Oilers don't win the Stanley Cup. I don't remember the last time that's happened, but that is possible. The Conn Smythe can go to a player from the losing team. But
here's what I'm going to say is it has gone to the losing player, right? But the Conn Smythe, the name of the trophy, it's similar with the Norris Trophy, where the Norris Trophy is best defenseman, but now it's kind of become most points by a defenseman. The Conn Smythe is best overall player in the entire playoffs. It should go to Connor McDavid regardless. Yeah. Absolutely regardless. And if Dallas made it past the first round, it should have gone to Jake Ottinger. If it's that, this is going to be the big test for the NHL. This is a completely different topic. This is my quick little thing. Either rename or either redefine what the award is and give a different award for the best player in the overall playoffs besides just the finals, or do it correctly. That's all I'm saying, because Connor McDavid deserves this 100%. He was ridiculous.
The only thing I will say is he should, unless Vasilevsky gets like 4 straight shutouts and is like incredible, because he's the only other one that should be in the running. I think Makar obviously deserves a shout, but to me it's Vasilevsky who, I mean, single-handedly got them past the Rangers, got them past Florida. So I would say he's also in the running, but there's no debate that Connor McDavid should at least be considered. At least.
Yep, 100%. All right. It's time for everyone's favorite. So let's preview the matchup. And wow. So speed against speed, toughness against toughness, defense against defense. But let's start with this first. Colorado, obviously, is a complete package. There's no question about that. Although I said this before, and I also heard it on the radio. Outside of Jordan Binnington and Ville Husso for the St. Louis Blues, they haven't faced a legit goalie until now with Andrei Vasilevsky. Do we expect maybe Colorado to have are they going to have to, they're going to have to probably, if they want to win, outscore their way to winning this thing, because whoever's in goal for Colorado isn't on the level of Andrei Vasilevsky, right? Both Ville Husso and Jordan Binnington both played better than Darcy Kemper, despite the fact that Colorado won the series. Kemper gave up a lot of soft goals. That can't fly against this high-powered Tampa Bay Lightning team. Do we think, because, teams, you need goaltending, right? Can Colorado, this is kind of more so a rhetorical question, potentially outscore their way into the winning the Stanley Cup? It's a question, but I think if any team could do it, unlike, the Florida Panthers, I didn't think they could do it. I think Colorado's a team that could potentially do it.
Yeah, I mean, can't believe I'm saying this, but a lot of stuff you've been saying in this episode, Jacob, has been spot on. I mean, you're on a roll these playoffs. Yes, I do think Colorado can potentially outscore their opponent in
keyword potentially.
Potentially, it's a big potential thing. And another big potential thing is, which version of Darcy Kemper are we going to see?
Yep.
Are we going to see St. Louis Blues series Darcy Kemper? Or are we going to see first round Darcy Kemper? Because first round Darcy Kemper was very solid. Second round Darcy Kemper was not great. You just mentioned it. And, you get rid of Philip Grubauer, you bring in Darcy Kemper. It's kind of a lateral move. A lot of people really like Darcy Kemper, but again, injuries and consistency are a big problem. He's got to be consistent in this series if they want a chance to win, because if he starts giving up soft goals, we saw it against Tampa, or we saw it against New York for Tampa, they can the second they get one goal, they can immediately play shutdown defense for the next 45, 50 minutes if it comes down to it. They are just that good of a well-oiled machine where they can basically do whatever they want if they have a lead. They can do anything. My thing is, you can say a similar thing about goaltending besides the Eastern Conference Final for Tampa. I don't really Jack Campbell, yes, played phenomenal, but he's not that high caliber goaltender. Sergei Bobrovsky played decent, not very great though. And again, for guys making $10 million a year, he's really not that level of player. I will still say that Tampa faced better goaltending than Colorado. Colorado's kind of had a cakewalk besides their St. Louis series, which was very tight, which was very contested, which we expected to happen in that series. It's gonna be a bloodbath in this year. I don't know.
It's tough. It's so tough.
It's so tough. Unlike with the conference finals, I mean, we kind of knew who was going to come out of both of those going in. I don't know who to pick here. These are two fantastic teams. I'm going to have the most fun that I've had watching Stanley Cup Final in God knows how long. We're going to have to circle back on who to pick. I still don't know. I really don't.
I will say this, and you're absolutely right about the goaltending situation. But I think when it comes to Tampa hasn't faced a caliber defense like Colorado. I think that's the point that we should be making, because the Rangers defense was not that good at all against Tampa Bay. They crumbled. They let Tampa bombard Shesterkin. I mean, in the last game, Shesterkin had 37 saves, was it? It was some ridiculously high number. Against Florida, defensively crumbled against Tampa, and Toronto never really was defense. Toronto was scoring as many goals as possible. So
they almost won that series. So
you're right. But this is the first time that Tampa is going to have to go against one of the best, if not the best defense, and easily in the West. This is a very exciting matchup because it's huge what ifs that are occurring with this playoffs or with this series, I should say. What if Darcy Kemper shows up all of a sudden? Then you're looking at Colorado to be a favorite. What if Tampa gets Braden Point, a fully healthy Braden Point, back? What is that going to do for the team? It's all these huge, big question marks that I think, I still don't know, but it's one of those things where what if that happens, leaning one way or the other, is going to decide the series. Because it's that tight. These teams are known to be little mistake teams. And when the other team does make the mistake, they will make you pay. So it's really going to be who makes the first big mistake. And that's going to decide the series, which is incredible to think about how well-oiled machines these two teams are. To if we're breaking this down, it's who's going to make the time is going to lose the series. That's incredible.
That's why this series is so good, though. That's why this is
who's going to lose the first 50-50 puck battle that in the corner, you throw it out in front of the net and they score, right? Who's going to, go down on a 2-on-1 when they're not supposed to and they take the shot, right? Like that. And both these teams have the ability to make the other pay for their mistakes. It's so even. And we haven't even talked about Nazem Kadri.
But it's also simple too. I can even make it broader, but simplify it. Who wins game one? Whoever wins game one, all of a sudden you're like, how does Tampa, say Tampa wins game one? How the heck does Colorado get back in the series? Colorado wins game one. How does Tampa get back in the series? It's that hard. And I think it's a little bit harder for Tampa for the fact that I think, is Colorado the home team, right? They got,
because they had the better record. Yeah.
I think that might play a factor in this. I think that I've seen it more in this playoffs than I think a lot.
Sorry.
Don't mention it. Don't. Yes. Game 7. Yes. Don't. It's okay. Fine.
But I think honestly, last year you truly saw the effect of the fans because that was the first time fans were full force in playoffs due to COVID. This year you're seeing it again. No offense to the Carolina Hurricanes, but that was their playoffs. They could at home nobody could touch them besides their game 7 against the Rangers. But throughout, like Josh, you can agree with me. At home, they were the favorites to be in the Eastern Conference Final.
At home, they were the Stanley Cup. At home, they were the Stanley Cup finalist.
When they were away, they looked like they were battling for the first overall pick. It just, the consistency was not there. But that's how much the fan base was full in. You look at, I mean, I don't like them, but you look at MSG. How raucous and crazy was Madison Square Garden, and how easily did that fuel the New York Rangers?
Specifically in game 1 and 2.
That's the only reason they won those games was of how energized the crowd was, and Tampa's crowd got them back in the series. So I think that little detail of Colorado winning more games in the regular season could be the single factor why they win the Stanley Cup.
Pepsi Center is going to be rocking. I mean, it's been 20 years since they even made the Western Conference Final. So it's been even longer since they made the Stanley Cup Final. I mean, this is going to be. I mean, that stadium already has one of the most loyal fan bases. I mean, in all of the NHL. I mean, they went through that whole Matt Duchene debacle.
Yeah, I was waiting to pull the words right out of my mouth. It's crazy. You don't want to talk about a quick rebuild. I'll wait to get back. Like, this team was absolutely horrendous in 16-17, and with the Duchene and just all that drama. And then they make the playoffs the next year, right? And then they draft Cale Makar. Like,
with the pick that they got in the Duchene trade, because Ottawa was terrible.
Right. Like, it's amazing. It's incredible how well Joe Sakic has done. And if you see the look on Nathan McKinnon's face, if there's any guy that wants it more on both sides, it's Nathan McKinnon. Say, you see, he didn't smile in like the Clarence Trophy picture. He's like, hey, no smiling. Job not done. And you know what?
He channeled his inner Kobe Bryant. Their job's not finished.
I was just going to say
mentality.
that.
I love that mentality by the
and
by
he's
the
been
kid.
a beast.
He's an absolute beast. I mean, he's already come out and said that he's going to take a pay cut to stay in Colorado.
He's already incredibly underpaid.
I think he's one of the more respected players in the league.
I completely agree.
And so was Landeskog.
But here's the thing too. Did anybody else see Tampa smile? No. They've been here. They know what this is like. This is like, okay, yeah, whatever. Like, let's go win the big one now. Like, this is incredible. This is truly incredible because it's as I stated in the beginning, these are the two favorites right here. These are the two best teams in hockey that are going at it for a cup and in a 7-game series. And I'm going to be honest with you, if this doesn't go to 7, I'm going to be a little disappointed. I'm going to be a little disappointed if it doesn't go to 7 because it absolutely should, because these two teams are that good.
Knowing the hockey gods, since we didn't get 7,
it'll be a sweep. It would be a sweep or something.
But that's the thing. It'll be a sweep. It'll be like a 7-0 game in each one. It'll be like absolutely embarrassing. But
I think it's going to feature both high scoring games and also low scoring games.
This is going to be the best series of the playoffs.
Yeah.
Forget Minnesota St. Louis round 1. Forget Battle of Alberta was fantastic.
Battle of Alberta was fun.
It was very fun. But this is why the NHL is so great. You can finally have the two best teams that deserve to be here. Both teams rightfully deserve to be here. They're going to battle out. This is exactly what you look for. Last year, Montreal earned their way, sure, but everyone knew Montreal was going to get destroyed.
Tampa didn't deserve it.
It's okay.
The other team that deserved it.
It's okay.
Oh my God.
It's okay. The year before,
and you know what? Speaking of your team, so we're actually going to hold on our predictions now because we have some developments since the last time we have been on Silky podcast. Josh, finish your thought before if you have anything else.
Oh, I mean, I was just going to say the fact that, like, I think everyone knew going in to the last couple of Stanley Cup finals that Tampa was going to win against Dallas just because Dallas kind of had Dallas, you had to deal with a very injured Avalanche team and a choking Vegas team because, Peter DeBoer. Well, I already lost my train of thought because it's just Peter DeBoer, who, again, speaking of which, is now the favorite to be the Dallas head coach. So they just wanted the one cup final appearance, and they're like, that's it, we're out. Anyways, continue because I know we're talking about coaches. Right?
Yes, we are talking about the coaching carousel, and there's a lot. Let's talk about, I think, probably the big four, I guess. Barry Trotz, Bruce Cassidy, which caught me way off guard, John Tortorella, and Peter DeBoer. Where do each of those guys?
One of those things is not like the other.
I know, but the biggest names that are on the market right now that are in rumors and, you know, stuff like that. Also, I've heard, all right, so let's start with Bruce Cassidy because that was a shock. I don't think he was the reason why, you know, the Bruins didn't go far in the playoffs, you know, and there has been some rumors. David Pastrnak wants out if Don Sweeney is still the general manager. And I don't see David Pastrnak leaving Boston. And I don't see Don Sweeney leaving Boston either. So, and I think Pastrnak, he's not a free agent yet, but even if he is, I think he's an RFA.
He's got one more
He's
year.
got 1 year left, and then he gets that big paycheck.
Right, and he's going to get a big paycheck, and we don't know what's going to happen.
Deserves a big paycheck.
Bergeron.
Well, Cassidy said that he wants to take Bergeron with him, and Cassidy could go wherever he wants. I mean, look, this is by far, I don't know what Don Sweeney and the Boston Bruins are doing. Bruce Cassidy was the best coach you've had in a while. I mean, you had Claude Julien, he was just not it. You bring in Bruce Cassidy, and their defensive structure was top of the league or top 5, and every year he was there. It's not his fault. It's the fact that they're going out. The general manager is going out making moves to get like Eric Holla and like Trent Frederick instead of going out and getting like real depth pieces besides the Taylor Hall trade for them. I don't know what they're doing. I mean, and now you're going to lose your best player you've had in a very long time in David Pastrnak, and Patrice Bergeron might go away too, depending on where Bruce Cassidy goes. I mean, if that happens, I don't understand how Don Sweeney is still the general manager, but I know that him and Cam Neely are like, they're, you know, they were like brothers or they're very close because they played hockey together. And that's going to be the downfall of the Boston Bruins, that those two are too focused on their friendship versus what's best for their franchise and their team, which is both of them stepping down and letting new ownership take over.
So where do you think he ends up? We'll discuss about each coach. Josh, where do you think Bruce Cassidy ends up? You know, there's a lot of teams that need head coaches. I know I'm putting you on the spot.
It's a really tough one for me. I think it's a tough one because there's a lot of great places. I don't really like him in Winnipeg. I like Barry Trotz in Winnipeg more. I think he might stay in the East. I genuinely think that Detroit would be a great place for Bruce Cassidy. Detroit thinks they're coming out of a rebuild. They just got rid of Jeff Blashill. They've made great strides besides in the goaltending department this season. They've got a lot of young pieces, and Bruce Cassidy can really turn that team from a inconsistent group that will stay middle of the pack to taking over Boston's spot within the next year or two in that Atlantic top 3. I think that's a perfect fit for him. For the Devils, maybe, but I think if Bruce Cassidy, I mean, he deserves a job. It depends if he wants to retire. I highly doubt he wants to. He's a fantastic coach. If Detroit is serious, if Detroit and Steve Yzerman are serious about getting out of this rebuild, Bruce Cassidy is your guy. He's got to be.
I like him at Vegas. I think Vegas would be a pretty interesting fit for him because I think Vegas needs it. I think they need that type of. Vegas is going to go after either Trotz or Cassidy. I don't think there's a question about that. I don't think they land Trotz. We'll get to Trotz where I think he'll go, and it's going to pain me to say where he'll go. But I will be honest. I think Vegas needs that little defensive structure, and I think because Vegas is one of those teams where they have very good defensive forwards. I mean, Mark Stone is, in my opinion, one of the best defensive forwards in hockey. You know, and you got guys like I mean, I think William Karlsson's very underrated in that department. I don't think Riley Smith will stay. I think he'll go somewhere else, but he was pretty good in that department too. And I mean, look, Pietrangelo, for how old he is, you know, he's still pretty darn good. He's still one of the best defenders in hockey. And I think Robin Leonard's not getting any younger. It's going to be interesting. And from what I've heard, Leonard wants out right now because with the surgery issues, but
all thanks to Peter DeBoer.
Your favorite. Oh my God. Can you imagine if that happens? Like Carolina just suddenly fires their coach.
DeBoer, Mike Smith, Tony D'Angelo.
It would be the best day of my life.
Hey, can't forget Evander Kane and Max Domi.
Oh, why
Yeah,
not?
those
Let's
two.
just add it all on at that point. And why don't we get Ty Domi coming out of retirement too? Just
Yes.
add him to the squad, right?
Let's just do it. Let's get Leo Komarov. Let's bring back the Isles first line legend.
See, I wouldn't wish that upon my worst enemy. So,
But no, I mean,
sorry.
here you have a great point, Tim. My thing with Bruce Cassidy is I think Vegas has royally screwed themselves with going all in every year. Their prospect pool is dried up. They're in cap hell. I genuinely do not know if Cassidy wants to go to a team that is kind of in a similar boat with Boston, where they don't really have a direction right now. Yes, they want to go all in for a cup, but because they keep going for these flashy guys and spending all this money, they're kind of locked. Boston was in a bit of a cap trouble. I mean, granted, it's whatever Bruce Cassidy wants. I think for him, it might be who gives him more money. But if I was smart, and Bruce Cassidy is a smart guy, I'd go to an up and coming team that's hungry. That, yes, Vegas is very hungry. They've thrown so much money out, but they've also just shown that they're perennial chokers. And I don't know if he wants to go there. I think it would be a good fit. I think you're right on the nose about Trotz and Cassidy being their two top guys, just because they love the flashy everything. Because Vegas, the flashy city. But I think if Cassidy wants to go to a situation that's not like Boston, because I think that George McPhee did McPhee step down as a general manager?
Yes, he is not.
Okay, never mind that. I was gonna say McPhee wasn't a good general manager.
Joey McCrimmon is their general manager.
He's still not great either, in my opinion.
I
know, but the thing is, if you want to go to a team that's not gonna, screw you over and is very serious and has been doing everything right these last few years, that's the Red Wings. Steve Yzerman has been doing a masterclass of a rebuild for them. So that's me. I do think you're right on the nose with it either being Trotz or Cassidy. I just think if Cassidy was smart, he'd stay away from everything that's going on in Vegas.
I'm actually going to disagree a little bit. I think if there's a guy that should go to, actually, I think Barry Trotz does land in Vegas, because Vegas is an experienced team. And with Trotz, the reason why Barry Trotz was fired by the Islanders, because the players kind of lost him, and the Islanders are a young team, right? Barzell kind of lost him because, the style that he plays. Beauvillier had a down year. Vegas has a lot of experienced guys that will play that kind of system, and it will kick them back in, because we saw what Trotz did with the Islanders, turn them into the worst defensive team into the best defensive team in the National Hockey League. So I think, let's talk about Barry Trotz. We talked a lot about Bruce Cassidy. I think Vegas, I think also Philadelphia is a really good fit for Barry Trotz, because they also have some experienced guys. The Winnipeg Jets are probably a solid number 2 outside of Big. He will probably bring back the career of Mark Scheifele and also Blake Wheeler. Those two guys will be such better players under Barry Trotz, and also Connor Hellebuck will bring back, will probably regain his, elite status. Jets were surprisingly not very good this year. So
I wouldn't call that super surprising, because the Jets are kind of in a weird spot for me, where
they lost a lot of their defense too.
They did, and
like,
you also
huge.
Trade away your franchise piece in Patrick Laine a couple years ago. So they're kind of in a weird spot.
Well, Barry Trotz can work with what he's got.
I know, but if I'm Vegas,
did the Islanders have a star defenseman when Trotz came in?
I know that's a fantastic point, but Winnipeg's just kind of in a weird spot for me, where, yes, I think it's a good fit, and I think it could get them back into the playoffs, but do they really want that? Or do they want to start actually going for a rebuild? Because they don't have a whole lot of defense. Buffligan just, completely left the game of hockey. They lost a lot of their guys. So, again, it's a good fit, but for Winnipeg, you got to decide, do you still think that you can win with this group? Because you got rid of part of it with Patrick Laine. Or do you just restart and keep, Scheifele and Blake Wheeler's getting up there in age.
Build around Connor, Ehlers.
Right. That's the thing. You've got fantastic forwards, but you got no defense. I think that the New Jersey Devils is a great place for Trotz to go, because that team has some decent defensive pieces. Dougie Hamilton, when he's not injured. Ty Anderson is going to be a very good defensive piece for them. They've got some good pieces, and they just haven't had a good coach. And I think, with them getting the number 2 overall pick, depending on what they do with it, there's been rumors they might, trade it to get DeBrincat, which would be huge. I mean, again, I think Winnipeg or New Jersey are the top 2 places for Trotz to go. Trotz is a great fit in Philly, but Philly is not a smart team. They're going to go for Tortorella, and because that's just how they are.
Jacob, do you want to go or are you good?
I'll say one quick thing. I worry about Trotz in New Jersey because I could see the same thing happening with Barzal and Trotz, with Jack Hughes and Trotz, and that's exactly what you don't want. I think Jack Hughes will be willing to up his defensive game, right? But there's going to be hiccups there, right? Because there was with Barzal, there was when Barry Trotz was in Washington with Jacob Vrana, with sometimes Alex Ovechkin. It depends on if they're willing to buy in. I think Bruce Cassidy will be a better fit in New Jersey because I think he's worked with younger players and he's done well with younger players. Hence David Pasternak. Tim, go ahead.
I know it's just tough. It's just tough to figure out where these guys are going to go. Tim, go ahead.
I actually love Tortorella to Philly. I think that is a perfect move for the Philadelphia Flyers. And here's why. Tortorella is not a quiet guy. I think we all can agree on that. Philly needs that. Philly needs that loud voice in the locker room. And Torts has done a pretty good job too with dealing with not a lot and making it pretty solid. I mean, he's not at the Trotz caliber level, and I think Trotz would be really good in Philly too, but I think the city would embrace Tortorella. And I think that I mean, look, the Broad Street Bullies, right? Like, I think it would be perfect for them, but I think Tortorella having that loud voice in the locker room for Philly I think it would get a lot of players on board. But I like Tortorella for the fact that he doesn't care who you are. He like Kevin Hayes, if you're not playing well, he will scratch you. Kevin Hayes, one of the worst contracts I think in hockey. What does he make it? $7 million? 7 by 7?
About like 6.
We don't have Chris Lemo, unfortunately. So
that is true. He would be going crazy right now, or Mac Young. But
miss that guy.
But I will say, I think that would be great because Philly needs that voice in the locker room that we are going to do it my way because you guys haven't been there. So I'm going to take you there. And I think the Philly players would buy into that. I think Cam Atkinson would turn into a better player. I love the Cam Atkinson addition for Philly. I know he didn't have that best of a season, but I think he's perfect fit for Philly. But you got guys like a Travis Konecny, who I think would be really good for them. Like, I don't know with Carter Hart. I don't know my analysis.
That's why Trotz, like, if you bring
that's the thing
along with them, Carter Hart's a Vezina winning goalie.
But that's the thing. That's a big if with Mitch Korn. Mitch Korn is no doubt in my mind the best goalie coach in
100%.
all of hockey. But Korn was going to leave whether Trotz left or not. Is what it was reported by the Islanders and by people close to the Islanders, and it's apparently Mitch wants to retire. So if Korn retires, then that's a big that's a big that's a big factor when it comes to hiring Barry Trotz, because Trotz always brought along Lambert and Korn. You already lost the assistant coach, and if you lose the goalie coach too, that might maybe change a couple things. That might make some mixed reactions. I think Trotz lands in either Detroit or Boston. I think if he lands in Boston, I think it would be bad for Boston. I think Brad Marchand would be the perfect player for that. I think Pasta would have a very similar Barzal type effect.
Because that's the thing. I mean, Pasta already wants. I think Pasta's gone regardless. I mean, Cassidy's gone. Sweeney's doesn't look like he's stepping down or getting fired anytime soon. My one issue with Tortorella is that he has lost 2-star players now. He lost Pierre-Luc Dubois when he was on Columbus. And then when they got Patrick Laine, he lost Patrick Laine. He was scratching him, giving him maybe 8 minutes a game. Granted, Philly's in a spot where they don't really have that star forward or defenseman. So it would be
That's my point.
But if they get a guy, because they have a top 5 pick in this year's draft, if they get a guy like Logan Cooley or someone like that, and he becomes this big star, I wonder if you see the same thing happen to Tortorella. I do agree with, they need that voice because that team is just has no direction right now. They're completely lost. But when it comes to getting like a big time guy, obviously you can't do it with Carter Hart because he's your star goaltender, and he was fine with Sergei Bobrovsky and Panarin. I just don't know. It's going to be one. I mean, you could. I pray that you don't have the same issue happen where you have guys just quitting on Tortorella, because he was a really, really good coach for Columbus when they had their run when they beat Tampa. He was a phenomenal coach. He was a phenomenal coach in Vancouver too. Just recently, he's kind of lost guys. And I don't know if it's just he's changed his ways, or if it's just these guys are getting big heads. Pierre-Luc Dubois kind of has a big ego, and so does Patrick Laine. It could be one of those things, but I kind of agree with that. I do also agree that if Barry Trotz goes to Boston, it's a disaster. I think Boston, whoever goes there, it's going to be a disaster regardless, because Bruce Cassidy was your best coach by a mile. I think they completely screwed up by getting rid of him. I think the best possible destinations for some of these teams right now is New Jersey and Detroit, maybe Winnipeg, but I think Detroit's probably the most tantalizing for a lot of these coaches. You know, they're they're such a hungry team. They made some great strides. Lucas Raymond and Moritz Seider are going to be absolutely phenomenal. A guy like Trotz or a guy like Bruce Cassidy could really get oh my God, I'm Philip Zadina going. Almost forgot his name. He could get Zadina going, because he's been kind of struggling lately. I mean, look, until the offseason comes, we're not going to know. This is going to be a hectic offseason regardless. But I mean, this is the first time where we've had a lot of big moves, like trades that could be happening with John Gibson and DeBrincat. And then also we have all these big coaching names that could, go to different places. I don't know. It's so tough, man. I mean, you really don't know what's going on in these general managers' minds. A lot of them are not smart. So specifically whoever's going to hire Peter DeBoer, but we'll see what happens when that free agency period opens up.
I've heard rumblings of Nate Lehman, the coach of the U.S. National Team Development Program, could be going pro, coming to Boston, because I think they have some connections here. I've also heard David Quinn coming back.
For Boston.
Worst case scenario, Joel Quenneville. I don't think that will happen, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Vegas will do
get
it.
Reinstated first.
I could see that.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't be surprised if Vegas. All right, so I don't want to talk about Peter DeBoer, because we all know he's going to go to Dallas, and Dallas is going to crumble.
Second that happens, we'll just give me another hour rant. I got you.
Yeah, well, we don't have time. All right, so let's go back. I'm sticking with. I don't want to change my prediction, right? Because Tampa, there's just because they have Vasilevsky and Colorado doesn't. But I'm sticking with my prediction. I think Colorado gets it done in 7. I think it's going 7 regardless. And Cale Makar is my Conn Smythe Trophy winner. Josh, your turn.
That's so basic. I agree.
I don't care. You know how many times you've been right and how many times you've been wrong?
Look. I think Colorado also wins in 7. I think series goes 7 regardless. I think Colorado wins. I think Pepsi Center will just get behind them. I think they finally got that monkey off their back.
Yeah.
I think they just finally got that monkey off their back just because of finally getting past the second round for the first time in 4 years. I don't know who to pick for Conn Smythe. Cale Makar is having a really good playoffs. I'm going to stick with, I think this is the guy that should win it. I think it should be Connor McDavid. I know it's not going to be, but I think Connor McDavid wins Conn Smythe regardless. I think he should.
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, right.
I like fun. I like having fun. I feel like the Joker at times, and I like to watch the world burn. Give me Tampa in 6.
I thought you were going to say Tampa in 4.
Give me Tampa in 6. If Colorado wins, if Devon Toews doesn't win the Conn Smythe, I'm not happy. Just throwing that out there as an Islanders fan. Look, if the Canes won, if Tony DeAngelo didn't win, I would be mad too. Okay, so like it's the same thing. It's the same.
We're really close to getting away from that PG rating that we're gonna get. Like I'm just telling you right now, man.
But I'm gonna go personally, in my opinion, the best goaltender, and that's Vasilevsky. I'm gonna go. That's the only reason Tampa wins this, is I think they out goalie him. And I don't think anybody's going to be able to truly beat Vasilevsky. And I think they get it done. I think Tampa gets a 3-peat, official dynasty, best team of our generation by a mile.
100%. Yeah.
And I wouldn't be surprised if they're back next year too, knowing our luck. So
yeah. You know what? If Tampa wins, I wouldn't be surprised if Steven Stamkos win because first cup he was out. Second time around, had to have gone to Vasilevsky. I think Steven Stamkos could also be in contention.
I could see that.
For the Conn Smythe Trophy because he has had first. I know it's not about the regular season, but just in general, he's played for now first 100-point season of his career, and he has stepped up, not just like on offense as a 200-foot guy. Like in the series against Florida, I saw him block 3 shots. Like that's what you need from your captain. And I'm sticking with my prediction. Colorado in 7. Cale Makar, Conn Smythe. I don't care if it's basic or not.
It's so basic.
All right. You know what? It might be right. And I've been right.
Yeah. Oh my God. That's such a That's such a crazy outlandish take. Of course it could be right. It's like a 75% chance of happening.
I like to do this thing where I add a little fun fact about the playoffs. I want you to guess, Josh, specifically you, who leads the playoffs in shutouts?
In shutouts? It can't be Vasilevsky.
It's Mike Smith.
You're joking. You're joking.
Mike Smith is the only one with 2 shutouts in the entire playoffs.
There's only been 2. Wow.
Well, no, the only person that has multiple.
By one team.
Yeah.
That's.
I love how we're ending on a Mike Smith note. All right, thank you guys. Yeah, thank you guys so much for tuning in. We will be back for a free agency edition. That one is going to a lot of free agents. Johnny Gaudreau.
We might do a Stanley Cup recap. We might.
Yeah,
We'll
it'll all be part of it. All right, thank you guys for tuning in, listening, and enjoy the Stanley Cup Final.
Hey everybody, thank you for tuning into this edition of Penn State Sports Night. We hope you liked that segment.
And we're sure there's other Penn State Sports Night segments that you are going to love as well. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content.
And check us out on social media for updates and behind the scenes clips and pics. Follow us on Twitter at PSSN TV and on Instagram at PSU Sports Night to keep up with all the action.
For all of us here at the Belisari Media Center, we are
Penn State Sports Night.